Hello everyone, Mike here. Welcome to lesson number 3. Once again, these lessons are based on the information in my instructional texts, understanding how to build guitar chords and arpeggios, and understanding chords, arpeggios, and scales for guitar, volume 2. Both these books are available on Amazon.com. In these videos, I'll be demonstrating, explaining, and expanding upon the concepts in my books. So as a continuation of what we discussed in Lesson 1, today we'll look a bit more closely at the concept of learning in layers versus the more popular scale approach. I remember when I first began to learn about improvisation, the first thing I learned was a pentatonic scale. And next I learned diatonic scales and modes, and I practiced scales all day long. I knew them forward and backwards, and when it came time to improvise, I was okay as long as the tonality didn't shift, or as long as I stayed in one key. And believe me, I was oblivious to chord changes as I improvised. I was so wrapped up in playing my pattern of dots, I didn't know what was going on. Again, this seemed to work for me as long as I was playing in a very simple harmonic context, staying within the same chord family. But once the harmonic tonal center shifted, I floundered. Even something that seemed as simple as country music was very challenging, because in country music, even though the key or harmonic tonal center may remain the same, because country music tends to linger a bit longer on each chord change has the effect of a change of key or a different tonal center. So for example, if the song was in the key of G for 4 measures, when it changed to C or some other chord, the scale I was playing in G didn't work anymore. I needed to be playing to that new chord, even though the overall key of the song hadn't changed. So the long and short of this is, all those scales I was practicing made me a great scale player, but not such a good improviser or not such a good musician. So I needed to relearn how to play the guitar. I needed to bring this world of dot patterns over here that I called chords, and this other world of dot patterns all the way over here that I called scales together to give myself a single focus so that my concept of playing chords or melody weren't two separate worlds, but instead different layers of a single musical focus. So in the previous lesson, we discussed octave regions, and we learned that the guitar is made of 5 cyclical, overlapping patterns of octaves, and that this pattern of 5 octave regions is the skeletal framework on which we'll build everything else we learn on the guitar: chords, arpeggios, and scales. Now, if you remember, last week I played some examples for you of this concept of learning in layers. Last lesson, I played for you a minor pentatonic scale and a dominant 7 arpeggio, and demonstrated for you how I drew from this palette of tone colors to improvise a melody. And in that demonstration, we highlighted the major third and minor third scale degrees, like this. Here's a minor pentatonic scale. There's the minor third, minor third, minor third. Now here's the dominant 7 arpeggio. Major third, major third, major third. So once again, listen closely to how I'm using a melodic improvisation to highlight or complement a specific chord or harmony. And remember how I drew upon the major third and minor third in different ways to craft my melodic improvisation, like this. Now let's go a step further and listen to how my melody changes to accommodate a changing harmony. So for example, let's go to the key of G, and let's say I'm playing against a G chord, right? Now, when the harmony changes to C, G is not going to work anymore. I'm going to need to change my melodic focus to the C chord. So in other words, I'm focusing on playing to each chord versus trying to play one scale that's going to cover everything. So it might sound like this. So you could hear the harmony change, even though I wasn't playing any chords. You could hear the change from G here. So you always remember that melody wants to gravitate toward harmony. When you hear a certain harmony, that's going to be like a magnet tugging on the melody. It's going to pull the melody toward itself, so we hear that. And then when we change to a C chord, and then back to G. Now, you notice when I changed my melody from G to C, I stayed in the same region of the fingerboard over here. So for G, I was playing region 1. But for C, I'm in the same area of the fingerboard, but I was actually playing in region 4. But I could have, if you're just beginning to learn this, if G is here, let's say you're just learning your way around region 1, you could play G in region 1 and then play C in region 1 up here at the 8th fret. And then go back to G. So how do we do this? How do we begin integrating these seemingly two worlds of chordal harmony and scales or melody into a single focus as different layers of one another? Now, in my first book, I begin by showing you the very foundational building blocks of this concept. Let's look at these basic building blocks and how we build layers. If you remember, in our previous lesson, we looked at the major scale, and I showed you how we build major and minor chords. So the pattern of these two simple chord triads looks like this within our 5-octave regions. Once again, notice the only difference between the major and minor chord is the third. Now let's begin by looking at region 1. Now you see in region 1 the pattern of roots, and on top of this skeletal framework, I'm adding major thirds and fifths. So from roots, as my most foundational building block, I'm adding thirds and fifths, or a minor third. So if I play all of these chord tones in sequential order, I'm playing a major arpeggio. In this case, it happens to be a G major arpeggio, or I'm playing a G minor arpeggio. So this concept of playing to the chord is really very old school. This is how you learned to play guitar in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. This idea of using a scale-oriented approach as a sort of shortcut to improvising didn't come along till the late 60s, early 70s. So practicing scales can have its benefits as far as sharpening your playing technique, But if you don't build your guitar learning in layers, the way I'm showing you, you'll be lost in the world of key changes and changing tonal centers. So you need to learn scales as another layer of harmony, the way I show you in my books. Building from octave regions to chords to arpeggios to pentatonic scales and beyond, you need to see all of those elements as one layer building upon the other with one single focus, as opposed to chords and scales being two separate worlds. And I'd also like to point out that if you're a beginner, not to get discouraged by advanced technical ability. In other words, I'd like you to separate the demonstrations I give you into two parts. Number one, basic guitar or musical principles, and number two, technical ability. On the one hand, technical ability can take you many weeks, months, or years to develop. But underneath the advanced technical skill are very simple concepts that even a beginner can learn. So if you're a beginner, you can start learning and understanding the guitar the way I'm showing you, and with these simple building blocks, you'll now have a strong foundation to develop advanced skill or technique. All right, so stay with me in these videos as I give you these simple basic building blocks that will help make you a great guitar player. I'll see you next time.